On June 10, 2026, photos surfaced of Rick Ross sitting in a plastic chair at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, waiting to board a Frontier flight like any other passenger. For a man who built his entire identity around never doing anything the regular way, the internet had one immediate question. Did Rick Ross go broke? Ross responded on Instagram stories. His jet was being upgraded with Starlink.
For the ones who want to know where my jet at, I obviously didn't get the memo. It's being updated with Starlink.
And he chose to fly commercial to Colombia, party with Trick Daddy. He also said he might buy the entire sea wing of Atlanta's airport. The explanation was very Rick Ross, but the photos were already everywhere. Drake's fans were already flooding the comments with his Iceman lyric. If I'm lying, I'm flying economy. I bet I know who I see. And the question wasn't going away. The answer is more complicated than yes or no, and that's exactly what makes it worth telling. Early life. Rick Ross was born William Leonard Roberts II on January 28, 1976 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, but his story starts in Carol City, Florida, where his family settled when he was young. Carol City, now Miami Gardens, was being hollowed out by the crack epidemic in real time during Ross's childhood. Not the romanticized version rap later turned into album covers, but the actual version. Generational poverty, economic stagnation, and a neighborhood where the standard exits were narrow. His mother was a registered nurse who worked 2 or 3 jobs and quietly bought real estate on the side. Her philosophy was simple. When you buy something, make sure you can touch it. Ross absorbed that early. His father barely registers in any public account of his childhood. Every origin story he tells circles back to his mother, which tells you everything about the template he later spent his career performing and building. As a kid, Ross was by his own admission a class clown who hid behind humor because he never properly learned his multiplication tables. He became a better talker, so people wouldn't notice he was struggling. That early instinct to perform confidence over insecurity is the entire Rick Ross career in one sentence. Football was his first real exit. He earned all-day first-team honors as an offensive lineman at Miami Carroll City Senior High School in 1993 and landed a scholarship to Albany State University. He took it, got there, and walked away. He later said something inside him told him he was never going to work for anybody, so he left. What came next is the part of his story the later persona was built to bury. In December 1995, William Roberts became a Florida Department of Corrections officer. He worked the job for 18 months, starting at $22,913 a year. He was a prison guard, the exact symbol that the Ricky Rose character would later position itself against. He even borrowed his stage name from Freeway Rick Ross, a real Los Angeles drug trafficker whose story had nothing to do with a correctional officer from Carroll City. The gap between the biography and the persona was not a small creative stretch. It was a complete inversion of reality, and it almost destroyed him when it came out. Almost. The rise. Music entered through his environment more than any single moment. His mother played the Isley Brothers, Isaac Hayes, and Sam Cooke at home. Outside, it was 2 Live Crew and 2 Short. As a teenager working at a car wash, he'd get time inside wealthy customers' cars, organizing their tapes, letting the music hit through their systems. He was sitting in other men's luxury and filing away what it felt like. By the late 1990s, he had left corrections and was building something in Miami's rap underground under the name Teflon Da Don. Nobody outside Florida was paying attention yet. Ross spent the late 1990s and early 2000s doing the kind of regional work that never makes documentaries but makes careers. He performed with Carroll City Cartel, recorded as Teflon Da Don, moved through Suave House and Slip and Slide, and built visibility by touring with Trick Daddy and appearing on Slip and Slide material. None of it broke nationally. All of it taught him the industry from the ground level. How rooms work, how deals work, and what a real cosign looks like versus a dead end. Then in 2006, Hustlin' happened. The single did not just chart, it created a bidding war between 3 of the most powerful men in rap, Oily Man I Can't Name, Irv Gotti, and Jay-Z. A regional rapper from Carroll City who had spent years grinding through local affiliations was suddenly the most wanted artist in the room. Ross chose Jay-Z and Def Jam, a decision he has described as the most important of his career.
When I went and sat down with Jay-Z, it was Jay-Z, L.A. Reid, my brother DJ Khaled. He was in there, and I just basically told him, just for everybody that may think this a one hit or one album wave, y'all better know this a whole nother type vibe right here. Rose finna outlast everybody. I'm finna go in, I'm coming in the game, I'm kicking in the door. Whoever they think the biggest, I'ma diss them just to get everybody attention, and then I'ma let my talent speak for itself.
Port of Miami followed and debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, not top 5, not top 10. #1, first week, out of nowhere. The Ricky Rose character was now locked in, not a developing Miami rapper with potential, but a fully realized cinematic figure. The boss, the kingpin voice, the man whose every bar sounded like it was being delivered from a penthouse. The reality of Carroll City and the corrections job was already being paved over in real time. What followed was one of the most consistent commercial runs in rap over the next 8 years. Triller hit #1 in 2008. Deeper Than Rap hit #1 in 2009. Teflon Don in 2010 is widely considered his artistic peak. The album where the luxury boss persona stopped feeling like a character and started feeling like a force of nature. God Forgives, I Don't hit #1 in 2012. Mastermind hit #1 in 2014. 5 Billboard, 200 chart toppers across 8 years, during a period when the industry was being restructured by streaming and physical sales were collapsing. Ross did not just survive that transition, he dominated through it. Parallel to the albums, he built Maybach Music Group into one of rap's most visible imprints. He signed and elevated Meek Mill, Whale, French Montana, Gunplay, Stalley, and others. MMG at its peak was not just a label, it was an aesthetic, a brand, a signal that you operated at a certain level. Ross understood that his value was not only in what he released himself, but in what his proximity did for other artists. He was curating an ecosystem, not just dropping albums. The money came fast, and Ross made sure everyone knew exactly where it was going. GQ's 2011 profile documented him dropping $10,000 in singles at a strip club on what he described as a cool night. Cars, jewelry, entourage, all of it on full display, all of it deliberate. Ross was not just spending, he was broadcasting. Every visible purchase was a reinforcement of the Ricky Rose character, and the character was the product. The more real it looked, the more records it sold, and the more records it sold, the more real it had to look. That loop worked beautifully, right up until it didn't. In 2014, he made what looked like the ultimate power move. He bought Evander Holyfield's former estate in Fayetteville, Georgia. 235 acres, a 54,000 square foot mansion, a boxing ring, a recording studio, a pond, the kind of property that makes a statement before you even walk through the door. But Ross later said something about that purchase that most people overlooked. He told Trapital that standing inside that estate, knowing what had happened to Holyfield's finances, he had one clear thought: I gotta make sure I'm not in his position. He knew. Standing inside one of the most expensive cautionary tales in celebrity financial history, Ross looked around and recognized the warning. The question was whether recognizing a trap was the same as avoiding one. By the mid-2000s, Ross had everything the persona promised: the properties, the label, the catalog, the Reebok deal, the cultural footprint. He had converted a Carroll City upbringing and a fictional kingpin identity into a genuinely large operation. On paper, the boss was real. What was happening underneath the paper was a different story entirely. The cracks. The first crack had actually come years earlier, and Ross almost didn't survive it. In 2008, while Triller was climbing the charts, the Smoking Gun published the correctional officer records. Not rumors, not whispers, actual documentation, photos, employment dates, salary figures. William Leonard Roberts II, Florida Department of Corrections, December 1995 to June 1997. The man who had built an entire career on cocaine kingpin imagery, who had borrowed his name from a real drug trafficker, who rapped about moving weight and evading law enforcement, had been law enforcement. Ross initially denied it. The records didn't care. Officer Ricky was born, and 50 Cent, who had already been circling looking for an opening, drove a truck through it. The mockery was relentless. Diss tracks, doctored images, public campaigns designed to make Ross look like the biggest fraud in rap history. What happened next is one of the more remarkable things in modern rap. Nothing. Ross survived it. Not because the story went away, it never went away, but because his audience had already made a decision about what they were buying. They were not buying a documentary. They were buying scale, voice, texture, and fantasy delivered consistently at a high level. Ross understood that about himself before most people understood it about him. In a 2011 GQ profile, he described himself plainly as a character, an actor playing a fictional role. The correctional officer revelation hurt the myth but couldn't kill it, because the myth was never really about biography. The Freeway Rick Ross lawsuit added another layer. The real Freeway Rick Ross sued over the use of his name and persona, arguing that Roberts had built a career on his identity without permission. The case dragged through the courts until late 2013, when a First Amendment ruling allowed Roberts to keep the name. That outcome was not minor. Losing it would have damaged the entire brand architecture Ross had spent years constructing. He won, but the lawsuit kept the authenticity question alive in public for years. Then the body started breaking down. In 2011, Ross suffered 2 seizures in one day while flying between shows. His public explanation at the time was exhaustion. He said he hadn't slept a full 8 hours in years. Later, in memoir interviews covered by People, he connected the pattern more directly to heavy codeine use and years of bad health decisions. Whatever the specific cause, the visual consequence was significant. For the first time, the invincible boss image had a physical crack in it. Ross was not a machine. He was a large man pushing himself hard through an unsustainable schedule, and his body had started to register the cost.
I wanted this so bad, and still do, that I suffered from seizures from not getting rest.
He kept moving. That is the thing about Ross. He has never stopped moving. but the hits kept coming. In 2013, a drive-by shooting hit his vehicle in Fort Lauderdale on his birthday. Nobody was hurt, but the incident was a reminder that the dangerous overlap between Ross's larger-than-life persona and real-world hostility around it was not theoretical. Later that same year, Reebok dropped him. The backlash came from lyrics on Rocco's UONO that were widely interpreted as describing drugging and sexually assaulting a woman. Reebok's statement said Ross had not demonstrated sufficient understanding or remorse. This was not just social media noise. It was a corporate partner pulling real money off the table in public in response to his own words. The brand took a visible hit. 2015 was the year the legal exposure became genuinely dangerous. Ross was arrested in Georgia on charges including kidnapping, aggravated assault, and aggravated battery, tied to an allegation that he pistol whipped a groundskeeper at his own estate. To post his $2 million bond, he used $1 million in mansion equity, $500,000 in cash, and a $500,000 surety bond. That combination is important. He had the assets to cover it, but he had to reach across multiple sources to do it. The boss was liquid enough to stay out of jail, but not so liquid that it was effortless. The case dragged into 2017 when Ross entered a no-contest plea to one felony aggravated assault count, paid a $10,000 fine, and received 60 months of probation while the remaining felony charges were dismissed. He avoided prison, but he had spent 2 years under serious criminal jeopardy connected to his own property. The estate that was supposed to be the symbol of his empire had become the scene of a crime that nearly sent him to the institution he used to work at. That same year, 2017, his longtime manager Black Bo died. Ross has spoken about that loss in the context of Port of Miami 2, framing it alongside his health scares as one of the emotional weights he was carrying during that period. It is a quieter detail in a story full of loud ones, but it matters. Behind the granite exterior and the constant forward motion, Ross was absorbing genuine personal grief while trying to keep a large operation running. And then came the IRS. In 2016, Billboard reported that Ross owed the federal government $5.7 million in back taxes. His response blamed an incorrect filing by a prior accountant. Whether or not that explanation is accurate, the dollar figure is not a rounding error. $5.7 million in federal tax debt is the kind of number that triggers liens, threatens asset seizure, and turns the distance between looking rich and being liquid into a very visible gap. Later, reporting, citing documents obtained by entertainment outlets, indicated Ross eventually paid off separate federal liens of approximately $4.6 million and $1.5 million tied to 2014 and 2016 taxes. He resolved it, but resolution and smooth sailing are not the same thing, and by the time those liens were cleared, the image of the untouchable boss had taken on a very different texture. The empire was still standing, but it had been hit from every direction: authenticity, health, legal, corporate, and federal. What came next would show whether the business underneath the persona was actually built to last. While the legal and personal fires were burning, Ross was doing something that most people caught up in the drama missed entirely. He was buying things, quietly, consistently, and in cash. The Holyfield estate in 2014 was the headline purchase, but the portfolio kept growing around it. A Southwest rancher's home, cash. An Atlanta area estate, cash. A Houston mansion. Then in 2023, a $35 million Star Island property in Miami, one of the most exclusive addresses in the country. The man who was publicly fighting IRS liens and felony charges in the same 5-year window was also accumulating one of the more serious real estate portfolios in rap. The Wingstop operation was the clearest expression of that strategy. Ross had been vocal about his franchise ownership for years, framing it as the evolution of rap money into generational wealth. By 2021, he was openly telling Trapital he owned over 25 locations.
When I first began, I count, and after 25, I was like, man, who could fathom this? Who could imagine this?
And describing music as the anchor for everything else, the attention engine that fed the business portfolio.
That's my heart. You know what I mean? That'll always be the anchor for everything I do.
That is a sophisticated model, and it worked until it didn't in the specific way that business empires run by celebrities often don't. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Labor found that Boss Wings Enterprises LLC, which operated 5 of Ross's Wingstop locations in Mississippi, had made workers cover costs for uniforms, training, background checks, and shortages out of their own pockets. The investigation resulted in $114,427 in back wages, damages, and penalties. The mogul image met real labor consequences in public with a federal paper trail. Ross the boss was docking wages from workers, making minimum wage at a chicken wing franchise. That detail lands differently than a tax line or a rap beef. It connects the brand to something ground level and uncomfortable. The pandemic had already forced a reckoning before the labor finding. Ross had built a significant portion of his income around touring and live performance, and when shows stopped in 2020, he had to reassess the entire structure of how money moved through his operation. That is the moment the airport chair starts to make sense as a concept. Not a single catastrophic collapse, but years of high overhead, tax obligations, legal costs, labor penalties, and a touring drought all running simultaneously against a portfolio that looks impressive on paper, but requires constant maintenance to stay functional. The Drake feud added a new layer of chaos to the later years. Ross had been circling the conflict from the edges for a while before it became direct. In 2024, he dropped Champagne Moments in response to Drake's Push-Ups, entering a beef that was already consuming rap's attention during the Kendrick Lamar versus Drake period. Then in July 2024, at the Ignite Festival in Vancouver, Ross played Kendrick's Not Like Us during his set and ended up involved in a brawl after the show. The incident reminded everyone that Ross, nearly 2 decades into his career and past 50 years old, is still capable of generating real volatility. Not managed controversy, not calculated PR, but actual chaos in a parking lot in Canada. His private jet made its own headlines in 2024 when it crash-landed in Dallas. Ross jokingly blamed Drake. Whether or not the joke landed, the image of Ricky Rose's plane going down added another layer to the growing visual narrative around his invincibility. By 2025 and into 2026, Ross was pushing forward on multiple fronts simultaneously. Renaissance of a Boss, his third book, dropped May 12, 2026 through HarperCollins. He launched the Port of Miami 20th Anniversary Black Tie Experience Orchestra Tour, reframing his debut album not as history, but as a living legacy worth celebrating at scale. His next solo album, Set in Stone, was announced for July 17, 2026, after an earlier projected date got pushed back, a small but telling detail about the operational reality of running a large rollout without a major label behind it. Then the airport photos hit. June 2026. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Ross in Adidas gear, sitting in a plastic gate chair, waiting to board a Frontier flight to Colombia to party with Trick Daddy and Ball Greasy. No private terminal, no entourage running the room, no Maybach on the tarmac. The internet did not wait for context before deciding what it meant. Drake's fans immediately surfaced the Iceman lyric, "If I'm lying, I'm flying economy. I bet I know who I see," and the clip went everywhere. Ross responded on Instagram stories the way only Ross can. His jet was being upgraded with Starlink. He sent it to pick up his mother. He chose to fly commercial. And since people were making it such a big deal, he said he might just buy the entire C-wing of the Atlanta airport.
For the ones who want to know where my jet at, I obviously didn't get the memo. It's being updated with Starlink. You know what Starlink is? Yeah, that's the $500,000 Wi-Fi. Yeah, that's where my jet at. And since it's a big deal for Rose to fly commercial, sometimes I might have to buy me a wing at the Atlanta airport.
Classic Rose. Meet embarrassment with escalation. Meet a question with a larger claim. The explanation was plausible. Private jets do get upgraded. People do send their planes to pick up their mothers. None of that changes what the image represented. A man who built one of rap's most expensive-looking careers, sitting in a plastic chair at a budget airline gate, carrying his own bag. Whether he was broke, liquid, asset-rich, cash poor, or simply making a practical travel decision on a Tuesday, the photo said something the music never would. And in 2026, with a book out, a tour running, and an album coming in July, Rick Ross needed the narrative to say something different. Rick Ross spent 20 years building one of rap's most convincing wealth performances. 5 #1 albums, a record label, a franchise empire, a 235-acre estate, and a voice that made everything sound like it was being delivered from the top floor. For a long time, the performance and the reality were close enough that nobody could tell the difference. They can now. The tax lines, the legal fees, the Reebok money walking out the door, the labor violations, the touring drought, the jet on the ground. Individually, any one of those is manageable. Together, over a decade, they tell a story about what happens when the cost of maintaining an image outgrows the income supporting it. The boss persona was never free. It just took a while for the bill to become visible. He is 50 years old, still pushing. A book, a tour, an album coming in July. But the airport chair is not a one-day story. It is the summary of everything that came before it. And right now, the gap between what Rick Ross looks like and what Rick Ross actually has never been more public. The biggest boss, sitting at a Frontier gate, waiting like everybody else. Let me know in the comments which part of this surprised you most. And if you made it this far, subscribe to watch more awesome videos. See ya.